Hello, Divorce and Beyond family. I've got some exciting news because we have teamed up with Headspace to guide you toward better mental health. With Headspace's meditation, mindfulness tools, and mental health support, you're set for a journey to a happier, healthier you. And there's more because if you sign up through our exclusive link, you'll enjoy 2 weeks of Headspace membership for free. So don't miss out on this opportunity to embrace your well-being. You can check out the show notes for the link or just go to divorcebeyond.com/headspace-Susan, and you'll be able to start your path to peace and joy today. This is just one more way that we can support you on your journey to a better beyond.
Coming up on today's episode of the Divorce and Beyond podcast.
Bullies parade and masquerade themselves as heroes these days because we value heroes a lot. So they pretend they like chameleons start to look like heroes and persuade people, hey, just follow me and cut everybody else off. And we see that domestic violence, we see that in the workplace, communities, online, in nations, etc.
Hello, and welcome to the Divorce and Beyond podcast. I'm Susan Guthrie, your host. As a top divorce attorney and family law mediator for 30 years, I know what you need to know to get through your divorce, and most importantly, how to move beyond it to thrive and transition to your new future. My experts and I are here to give you the insider view into the process, so listen in for the wisdom and expert information you need on your journey through divorce and beyond. Hello, and welcome to today's podcast. I'm Susan Guthrie, your host, and listeners, special treat today because our guest from our number one episode ever out of the almost 300 episodes that we have had on Divorce and Beyond, the wonderful Bill Eddy is back with us today. And I am so excited. He is here because next week, his next book comes out. It launches. You can pre-order it now. But his next book called Our New World of Adult Bullies, How to Spot Them, How to Stop Them, comes out. It is it's a book that's going to transform your life. I promise you. I've had the wonderful opportunity to read it already. I can tell you I have already used some of Bill's techniques and strategies that he shared in there as I have dealt with a few of the bullies in my life. And this is information. I don't care if you're getting divorced, what you're doing in your life. This is truly an issue that we are dealing with every day in our lives these days. Unfortunately, we seem to be surrounded by adult bullies. I'll ask Bill why that is. I think he has some thoughts on that. But first, Bill, I'm so delighted you're back. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Susan. I'm so glad to be back on with you. It's always wonderful.
Well, and I think this topic, it's so timely. We live in a world today, honestly, where that word bully and feeling bullied is something that I think I hear someone say to me almost every day. It just has become, a part of our culture. We're almost in a culture of bullying. And I do wonder, having your background, I didn't even mention as I did because I assume everybody knows Bill. But if you don't know Bill, Bill is an attorney, a mediator, a therapist, and the co-founder of the High Conflict Institute. He's dedicated his entire career to helping individuals and organizations navigate high conflict situations. And he has written all of the seminal books. You guys hear me say things like Biff and Ear all the time. That's Bill Eddy. So I didn't introduce you properly. Bill is honestly, I've told the story before, but when I was a baby attorney, I had my very first high conflict divorce. And if I had not found Bill's book, Splitting, and then Biff, I don't honestly know what I would have done in that case, and then the rest of my career. Honestly, it saved me, it saved my clients, and I started buying Biff, honestly, by the caseload and just handing them out to clients. So now that I've properly introduced you, I'm just wondering what your thoughts are on why bullying has become, and this adult bullies. I think people think of bullies as something that happened on a playground in elementary school, but we live in a world of adult bullies today. Why do you think that is?
Well, it really has a lot to do with our technology and our high-tech media. And what's interesting is because there's so much now, there's cable, there's networks, there's movies, there's social media. All our different forms of media are competing for attention. And the way to grab people's eyeballs is to show them disasters, is to show them high conflict behavior, bullies, etc. And so, for example, the evening news is really the bully news. So here's a scene from an airplane. Someone was being a bully. Here's a scene from highway road rage. Someone was being a bully. Here's a scene from a committee meeting in Congress. Some people were being bullies. And so everywhere you turn, tonight's news is basically the bully news. So what we're doing is we're showing people all this bad behavior. And unfortunately or fortunately, we human beings like to imitate each other. And so some people are going to imitate that behavior. So there's the exposure to all these images of bad behavior that we're seeing today. And that's been increasing really over the last 10, 20 years. But that you add an element to that I didn't really realize till I was researching the book. And that is bullies are probably maybe 5% of society. And they've generally been pushed to the edges, to the fringes. Families try to keep them under wraps. Communities don't like them. Workplaces don't hire them or fire them. So they're basically isolated. But with social media, they're finding each other. And so they're reinforcing each other's bad behavior. And what's really tragic is to read that a lot of these mass shootings we hear about are young men, 18 to 25, who are finding each other on social media and in a sense have a community of people who enjoy hurting other people, antisocial personalities who are a lot of our bullies today, and they're being encouraged rather than discouraged. So all around, it's really a big media impact, and it's really rapidly increased the last 10 or 20 years, and especially since the pandemic.
Yeah. And you mentioned this, and one of the things that I think is so sad about this is it's almost that the negative behaviors, the bad behaviors, the bullying behaviors are the ones that are being rewarded through the media, through the social media, through that. Whereas good behaviors, you don't see. Remember at the news in the old days where at the end of the day, they'd tell you a little heartwarming tale of something that happened? That doesn't get the same level of press nor attention that, what's the phrase these days about a woman who comes up and Karens, the Karens who come and yell at people, right? Or, people who get upset about things, or the fight on the airplane. That tends to be the thing that goes viral. And that's a reward. Attention it's kind of like a little kid who doesn't care if it's good attention or bad attention. It's attention.
You're totally right with that. And that's what happens. And with all our video and screens now, it's not just we're paying attention, but that's how you train people. We have training videos with the High Conflict Institute to train people how to calm conversations. Well, if you want to train people, show them a video. That's a YouTube. A huge part of YouTube is instructions, how to do things. And so you look and you see that's how to do it. And the trouble is, that's what we're doing with all our news about bullies. We're training people, especially young people and people with shaky mental health. This is the way to behave to get attention today.
Well, and that's an interesting point because you said this has been exacerbated since the pandemic. And we know that the pandemic also exacerbated mental health issues in an extreme way for a variety of reasons that would be more than beyond the scope of this podcast. But, that may be part of the reason why we're also seeing a rise in bullying behaviors.
Yeah, I think so, because as people were isolated, first of all, their frustration levels rose. We know we saw more domestic violence. It increased by about a third. Yeah. People couldn't get away. And so people are in tight quarters, but also they're in many ways socially isolated and watching a lot of stuff on their screens. And a lot of that's bad behavior. And so there's the theory that, for example, Vladimir Putin spent the first year and a half of the pandemic looking at maps of old Russia. And he was alone in the basement of wherever in the Kremlin looking at maps of old Russia and became obsessed with, I have to make Russia bigger on the map again. And then he comes out of the pandemic and invades Ukraine. And isolates himself from everybody except a handful of people who agree with him. So overall, what we're seeing is people were isolated from normal social behavior and exposed to a lot of abnormal social behavior and not being used to playing by the rules. So even school kids went back to school. They didn't know how to share as much because they didn't have to. They didn't know how to talk to people because they didn't have to. So it's really impacted. I think we don't realize how our brains work and how easily we're influenced by other people and by media, because media functions as other people showing us how to behave.
It's very significant, and it does make it feel like the world is a scarier, more threatening place for so many of us. And you mentioned earlier when you were talking about, people who exhibit bullying behaviors, that there's a desire to hurt other people, and I know you were talking about extremes, the school shooters and all that, but what are the characteristics of bullying behavior?
Well, in the book, I list 10 powers. I call them 10 hidden powers of bullies, but they're hidden in plain sight. So characteristics are, first of all, they can't stop themselves. You see them doing a behavior that 90% of people wouldn't do, and you say, well, he's going to stop now. Obviously, that didn't work. But he keeps going, even though it doesn't work. People don't learn their lessons. Bullies, people go, well, I'm sure he's learned his lesson, so we're not going to have a consequence for that behavior. Well, if he's a bully, he didn't learn his lesson. He's going to just keep doing that. So this unrestrained aggressive behavior, lack of empathy, lack of remorse, lack of emotional self-control, but also some other very interesting characteristics. One is what I call the bully story. And I found this across the board. Let's take domestic violence as an example. So the bully says, you can't trust people out there. There's a crisis. The world's a dangerous place. You can't trust anybody. You should be afraid of the world out there. And there's evil people out there. But also you, yourself, are really stupid and you need me to take care of you and help you. So you're a crisis. So there's a crisis. There's people to be against. And then I'm your hero. All you should need is me, So domestic violence victims, survivors often hear, why do you need to visit your family? I should be enough for you. And so bullies isolate people by creating fear and anger, often anger at yourself. Now, some bullies get people to be angry at other people, those people, the people they pick. But in domestic violence, they get you to really be angry at yourself, and your self-esteem goes lower and lower. So it's this three-part story. There's a crisis, there's somebody who you should, be angry at, and I'm your hero. And bullies parade and masquerade themselves as heroes these days because we value heroes a lot. So they pretend they like chameleons start to look like heroes and persuade people, hey, just follow me and cut everybody else off. And we see that domestic violence, we see that in the workplace, communities, online, in nations, etc.
I was going to say it sounds scarily familiar from our political situation that we seem to find ourselves in the world, across the world, not just here in the U.S. You mentioned Putin, but I can see those behaviors, this aggression, this anger. I guess I would say I've seen two different types of bullying behavior, and maybe this is a part of it. There are sort of overt bullies, the one who gets in your face, the one who's loud and aggressive. But there are also more subtle bullies who are a little more, I would say, manipulative emotionally. And that's sort of what you were describing there. So are there different types of bullies?
Well, I think there's different degrees. It's like a spectrum.
Okay.
But the three types that I keep seeing the most are the antisocial type, and this overlaps with antisocial personality disorder, where they really are aggressive, really actively deceitful, totally lying, totally making things up and manipulating people. And they're con artists, and that's part of the definition of an antisocial personality, is conning others. Then there's the narcissistic bully who sees themselves as superior, and they may not lie that much, but they exaggerate a lot and get you to believe that the way they think is the right way and the way you think is not. What we often talk about is gaslighting. All the bullies want to get you to think the way they think and not see what you actually see. And then there's the borderline bullies. And borderline personality disorder has a lot of mood swings, sudden intense anger. And that seems to be the majority of domestic violence perpetrators, of the serious domestic violence. Not that hit somebody or slap somebody once, but someone with a pattern of power and control. All three of these show up a lot in our bully behavior. Not everybody with a borderline diagnosis or narcissistic diagnosis is a bully, but there's a higher incidence of bullies in these three personalities. And so it doesn't make a lot of difference because they all have a bully story. Also, I didn't mention, but they also play the victim. I'm being victimized. You're taking advantage of me. I'm being victimized, when in fact they're the abusive person. They use a lot of projection, where what they're thinking and doing, they say, you're doing. I know what you're thinking. You're thinking these terrible thoughts, and you're not, but they are, and they're projecting it onto you. So we see these patterns. Also, polarization. And it's fascinating how bullies polarize families. I give examples in there of like a narcissistic parent who pits the kids against each other, thereby staying the focus and center of attention, center of power and control. But we see this polarization in the workplace. We certainly see it in politics. But what people don't realize is it's not about values and standards. It's emotional. And bullies drive polarization. That's the automatic way that they get more power and influence over other people. So when you see polarization, look for a bully. That's what I say.
Gee, I wonder who the bully is. out there in our world today. That's such an interesting way to look at it. And it goes back to that little kid, right? Because with polarization, the bully is getting attention from both sides of the pole, right? Both ends of the pole. Some of it may be very positive and some of it may be very negative. They don't really care because it's all attention. Hello, listeners. I know if you're listening to this podcast, you're likely going through a divorce or thinking about it. And if so, you are not alone. Over 1 million people get divorced in the United States every year. But we know that divorce can be an extremely complex and expensive process, especially if you have to hire a lawyer and spend a lot of time in court. And that's where Hello Divorce comes in. Hello Divorce is an online divorce platform that makes it easy and affordable to get a divorce yourself. With Hello Divorce, you can complete the entire divorce process online, in your own home, and at your own pace. They offer a variety of features to help you get through your divorce, including easy-to-use online forms and guides, a step-by-step walkthrough of the divorce process, and access to experienced divorce professionals for help and support. So if you're thinking about getting a divorce, I encourage you to check out Hello Divorce. The founder, Erin Levine, is a friend of mine, and I honestly admire what she has created with Hello Divorce so much. This platform is the change we need in the divorce industry. You can hear Erin explain more in her episode on the podcast entitled The FYI on DIY Divorce. I'll be sure to link to it in the show notes for you. So you can get more information, resources, and support at hellodivorce.com/beyond. And if you use the code BEYOND, you'll get $100 off your service. So go to hellodivorce.com/beyond.
And now we return to today's show.
Negative attentions is better than no attention. And you're right, it often goes back to childhood. That's where adult bullies come from. But I want to make a good point here, and that is 90% of kid bullies outgrow it. And so they're not bullies as adults. They find out, oops, I better not say that again. This person stopped being my friend. Or this person slapped me on the face. I better not say what I said again. But bullies somehow have gotten through and are stuck in that pattern of behavior in adulthood. And that's what we seem to be seeing more of.
So this strikes me that, and this is just a common theme, being a Bill Eddy book junkie as I am, right? We can't change them. The bullies are bullies. And so you and I have talked on the show before. I remember your forget about telling a narcissist they're a narcissist, because they're not going to change being a narcissist just because you tell them. So is it the same thing with a bully? Is there any changing a bully's behavior?
Well, it seems to be that coaching specific behavior change, like our New Ways for Families method, in family court, where both parents get ordered to take it and to work on skills of flexible thinking, managed emotions, moderate behavior, and checking themselves. We're able to impact behavior. And so we find that that's possible, maybe in half the cases.
Okay.
We have a similar method, New Ways for Work coaching. People that go through that, maybe half of them improve their conflict behavior. They call it in the workplace as sharp elbows, Maybe they soften those and sand them down a little bit so they can keep their job and still make a contribution. But about half of people don't change, and they're going to end up not in the marriage. They're going to end up not in the job. They're going to end up the community turns against them. They may end up in jail because they can't change. And I want to say right now, a lot of this personality stuff comes from early in life, either already in this tendency at birth, or early childhood abuse, or early childhood indulgence some bullies were indulged just because, you beat up the 3-year-old friend of yours. That's so funny. And so, but this mostly happens in childhood. So as adults, they're just like already on a course. So I emphasize in the book, don't be judgmental about bullies, be strategic. They're not bad or evil people, but they do need to be stopped. And that's where we have to focus our energy, not criticizing, yelling at them, judging them, is we need to stop that behavior. And then some of them can still contribute, and others we need to be protected from.
Right. And I think that the significant part there is really still the focus is on the behavior, not the label doesn't really matter all that much. What's important about the label is that it then leads you to, and this is what your book does so beautifully, is if you know that you're dealing with someone who's exhibiting bullying behaviors, the book sets out strategies for you that you can exercise to help protect yourself, to help insulate yourself, to help you manage and deal with the bullying behaviors that are directed at you. And that's really where we can make the most change, I think. Is that right?
Right, exactly. So, yeah, now that you mentioned, so I have 6 strategies at the end of each chapter on these different powers and ways you can address them with examples. There's over 60 examples of the patterns of bullying behavior. So you can see, this is what it looks like. And you can see also, this is what these people did to stop that bullying behavior. And a lot of it is one person. So let me go through the 6. Yeah. The first is just recognize these patterns because they're in your face. They're right in front of you if you know to look for them. Then the second is pull the plug on the bully. Is there some way you're supporting the bully? Are you keeping it a secret? Are you helping them do other things? And pull back what you're doing. Don't keep it a secret. Don't be isolated with this. Third is setting limits, is saying, if you continue to do this, I'm not going to do this for you. And so in the workplace and families and communities, often you can set those limits. Now, a lot of limit setting is helped by having other people support you in that. Before that, you can still tell yourself limit setting things. You can say, what the bully's saying and doing about me is not about me. It's about the bully. Or even speak up and say, I don't agree with you. We're going to have to disagree when they say you're stupid or whatever it is. Or just say to yourself so that you don't feel disempowered. But also is say, that's enough. And bystanders can say, that's enough. It doesn't have to be major confrontations, just simple little things. Saying to yourself, I have choices. I'm not stuck here. And what are the choices? Write a list so you remember, I do have more choices than I thought. So anyway, so recognize the pattern, pull the plug on any way you're supporting them, set limits, then impose consequences. And this is often where what we're seeing is there's actually legal consequences for a lot of bullying behavior. And so you may need to get help with that. Then the 5th is educating others so that people also recognize these patterns. And the 6th is standing with others to stop bullies. So if you're a bystander and you see somebody getting bullied and you say, that's enough, Joe, or that's enough, Jane, that's all you have to say. You throw them off because they're used to people being silent. And that's the worst thing. And that's part of why we're seeing more bullying. People just don't know what to do, so they're silent. Well, there is things you can do.
I think that's such a hopeful note in all of that, that there are things that you can do. And everything that you just listed are relatively simple things. The problem is, and you've talked about this with all different kinds of aggressive behaviors when it's focused at you, is you really do go into survival mode when somebody comes at you with that type of aggressive behavior. When someone is yelling at you, when someone has their finger in your face and is telling you you're, what did you just say, stupid or something like that, it's very hard to come up with complicated strategies. So it's very nice that these are relatively simple things that you can do. How, I'm wondering with, you said set limits. So it sounds a lot like setting boundaries, being able to do that and have consequences. What types of consequences will work with someone who's so socially unaware that they will be that aggressive, say on an airplane in front of 150 people watching them behave that way?
Well, I think the consequence, which people are starting to hear about, is if you cause a disruption on our airline, you're not going to be able to fly on our airline in the future. And people aren't thinking about that on their third drink. But when you get on an airplane and you go, I'm not going to have that third drink because I don't want to be the person that gets then taken off the plane, will not be allowed to fly again. That would be a consequence. We're starting to see, talk about setting limits, we're starting to see signs like government agencies that I've seen recently, where signs as there will be no abuse of our employees. If so, there will be, whatever consequences. And so putting people on notice, hey, you better not abuse our employees, because government workers, every frustration people have with the government, some people, bullies, take it out on one person who's an innocent worker.
Right.
It's like, I'm not the government. I have this tiny little job. Don't blame me for the whole world and everything. So I think putting people on notice. In the book, I have what's called a respectful meeting policy. And we developed that, I think, about 8 or 9 years ago because of a company that had outside consultants who were disrupting young women managers. And older male consultants felt like they could get away with that. And so we taught the young women managers is to admonish them they need to speak civilly, or we're going to stop and take a break, and I may have to ask you to leave. And so that kind of a consequence. So letting people know some bullies can stop themselves a little bit if there's a consequence coming, and others will still end up needing the consequence. Let's talk about workplace. I have a couple examples in the workplace where people were told, you've got to improve your behavior or you're going to be fired. And in 2 examples, they didn't work at all on their own behavior. They sued the company. It's like, come on already, change yourself and you can keep your job. And they lost. They sued their company and they lost their jobs. Part of, to me, the book is to notify people that there are consequences. People are stopping bullies, and bullies better watch out. And targets of bullies should know you can get help and there are things you can do. That's a long answer.
No, but it's a great answer, because I talk about on the show all the time that awareness is the beginning of everything. It's the beginning of all solutions, right? If you're not aware of what's going on and you're not aware that there are ways that you can deal with these behaviors, you're not aware that there are patterns to these behaviors, you're not aware of what can and cannot help, then it's very hard to effectuate any change. So the book does a wonderful job. First of all, I just want everyone to hear, it lets you know that if you're feeling particularly bullied in the world that we live in today, you're not alone. A lot of us are out here feeling bullied in this world. And, that part of it where together we have more power to stop these behaviors than alone is also, I think, a significant factor.
Yeah, it's really important. And in fact, that's the cover of the book, is the little fish is getting chased by the big bully fish. And so all the little fish get together and chase the bully away. and save the little fish. And I think it's that same concept that when we get together, and it's really amazing that in so many of the situations I looked at, someone was really getting harassed or assaulted or something. The bully had been doing it to dozens of other people. So if nothing else, find out, anybody else feeling what I'm feeling? Anybody else seeing what I'm feeling? Because 5 to 10% of people as bullies, there's the other 90% or more who, can get together and stop these folks. And that's where we are culturally now, is we need to start having more limit setting and more consequences and stop having bullying and personal attacks and all of that. And that'll make everybody feel safer in the world.
Well, which is what we can hope in the world and in our personal lives. So, as I mentioned, everyone, I have read the book. I highly recommend that you go and pre-order the book right now. It launches on June 11th, but you can pre-order it and it will go out to you on June 11th, so you can be one of the first people to have a copy. I highly recommend it. And again, this isn't just I know this is Divorce and Beyond, folks, but in the world we are in today, unfortunately, bullying is happening in almost every area of our lives. If you have a friend who's being bullied, a family member, someone in the workplace, or you just want to hand them out like candy, because frankly, that's the world we live in. Next time you get on a plane, go down the aisle and start passing out Bill's new book. So it's called Our New World of Adult Bullies, How to Spot Them, How to Stop Them. Highly recommend it. I'll have links to the book and how to pre-order it in the show notes. Bill, where else I mentioned the High Conflict Institute, but where else can people find out more about you, about all your books, about all the many wonderful programs that you have?
Well, the High Conflict Institute's the biggest source of information about me and books and seminars and consultations and all of that we do. We consult with individuals, we consult with groups, we give a lot of trainings. In terms of books, like this book and all my books are also on Amazon. Go to Amazon and put in Bill Eddy, you should be able to find
many, many books.
I got like 20 books up there.
You do.
But I also want to mention Barnes and Noble and independent bookstores. And independent bookstores are struggling. So if there's an independent bookstore near you, buy it from the independent bookstore. That's help keep them going so they don't get bullied out of business.
Perfect. So Amazon doesn't drive them out of business. But I highly recommend, you guys have heard me talk about Bill's books in almost every episode. I mentioned something about Bill. So now you've gotten to meet him. If you haven't listened to one of his prior episodes, I will also link to those. Bill has a wonderful episode on Biff. Which is brief, informative, friendly, but firm, for those of you who haven't heard me say that before. We have an episode on mediating with in a high conflict matter. And we have another episode on how to protect yourself if you are divorcing a narcissist or person with borderline personality disorder, based on his book, Splitting.
I also want to put a plug in for our podcast. The It's All Your Fault podcast I do with Megan Hunter, also with High Conflict Institute. And so a lot of people like that once a week. So if you listen to Susan's podcast and you listen to our podcast, you'll be able to deal with any problem that comes your way.
100%. I highly recommend It's All Your Fault. The podcast is wonderful. Bill's podcast partner and partner at the High Conflict Institute, Megan Hunter, has been on the show as well. She has the #2 most listened to episode of all time on our podcast. So Bill and Megan are two, of our shining stars here at Divorce and Beyond. I highly recommend the High Conflict Institute. Just go to the website. The resources, if you are dealing with a bully, if you're dealing with high conflict behaviors, the resources that are there, I can tell you're going to feel like you stepped into a gold mine. There's just so much information there. There's no other place to start but High Conflict Institute. And as I always say, everyone, right? Bill Eddy, Bill Eddy, Bill Eddy. So Bill, thank you so much for coming and joining us and for your latest book.
Thanks so much, Susan, and best wishes with your programs and all the work you do, because you're wonderful and helping people every day.
Thank you so much. Thank you for joining me today on the Divorce and Beyond podcast. I hope you found some information and inspiration to help you on this journey. Please join me every Monday at 6 a.m. Eastern Standard Time for a new episode. And if you like the show, please take the time to subscribe and leave me a 5-star review on iTunes. You can also find more information on the website at divorceandbeyondpod.com, where you'll find links to the YouTube channel, transcripts of the episodes, and other bonus content. So I'll see you next week to help you move through your divorce and beyond.